Okay, so we might start this session now. This is a session on how to build a good student-supervisor relationship, and it's being conducted by Dr. Shane Huntington, who I'll introduce formally in a minute. So there are just a couple of housekeeping things to get through. I do want to welcome you all in the audience and thank you so much for your attendance and also for your participation in, I think, what's going to be quite an interactive session. And again, I just want to thank the organising committee as well for what's been a really great and informative conference so far. If you'd like to, you can turn your video on. As I said earlier, I'm on the floor on a cushion, so we don't really mind, where you are, if you're working from home, if you're in your bedroom, if you're in your dressing gown. Doesn't matter to us at all. If you'd like to pop your video on and engage, we highly welcome that. But please do keep your microphone muted. To turn on or off closed captioning, you can hover over the live transcript button down the bottom of your screen and either hide or show the subtitles. We are recording and also live streaming these sessions. As this is quite an interactive session, Shane will be giving an introduction to the topic for the first 15 minutes or so and then open up for questions. And those will be recorded, but for the final 10 minutes of this session, we will stop the recording so that anyone that would like to ask anonymous questions has the opportunity to do that as well. We also want to provide a trigger warning as there may be sensitive subjects during this session. We acknowledge that we're not healthcare professionals and we're not qualified to provide counselling or therapy. So if these sessions do bring anything up for you, we've collected a range of international support resources at our website at mindsinacademia.com/resources. And I can add that link into the chat after I've finished this introduction as well. Please remain respectful of others. Inappropriate behaviour or comments will not be tolerated and they might result in your removal from the conference. If you need help during the session, please contact IT. So you can see Lucia and Deepa are our IT support managers today. So contact them through the Zoom chat, or you can also email them at minds.conference@gmail.com. So if you'd like to enter questions in the chat, you can do that at any time and they'll get addressed during the Q&A session after the first 15 minutes or so. You also will have the opportunity to raise your hand at that point if you'd like to unmute your microphone and ask your question in person. If you'd like to remain anonymous, you also have the option of direct messaging me as well in the chat. So moving on to welcoming Shane. I think most of you probably know me by now, but if you haven't been in the other sessions, welcome. I'm Emily. I'll be your chair for this session. Shane is going to be giving a presentation where he sort of talks about what a good student-supervisor relationship should look like, and then we'll open up the floor for Q&A. So I'm really excited to have now met Shane. We're both in Melbourne. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Little Big Steps, which is a kids' cancer charity. He wears a lot of hats. He was also an academic until 2008 with a PhD in physics. His specialty was in photonics and imaging, and he's published more than 70 refereed journal papers. He's been providing consulting services in communication and strategy for over 20 years. He's also the host and producer of 3RR's science radio program, Einstein A Go-Go. So really excited to have you with us, Shane, to facilitate this session, and I'll hand over the virtual mic to you to start.
Thanks, Emily. I appreciate that. Can everyone hear me well? No problems at all? Excellent. So what I want to do first is just acknowledge a little bit of where we're at the moment with regards to the sort of experience that PhD students are having. Some of you in Melbourne, some of you in other cities that have been in lockdown at various times. We're all in this sort of weird pandemic scenario. But the one thing that is absolutely true is that we all have slightly different experiences. So if you are on the call and you're able to turn your video on, that would be great. I encourage that, not so much because I need it, but because it's good for you to see each other and have a bit of a shared experience, which is one of the things that we have in short supply these days. That way, if you're really disliking what I'm saying, you can share that with each other with your facial expressions, or if you are liking it, you can give a little head nod or something just to let me know that you can still hear me. So by all means, do that. This is another one of the talks I'm giving where, of course, like most of us, when we give these talks, we don't wear shoes anymore. I had to give a talk in Shepparton a few weeks back, and it was the first time I'd worn a pair of shoes whilst giving a presentation in about 18 months. So it's a different world. Things have changed a lot. And I think there's a lot of things around students and the way they interact with their supervisors in this environment that we have to really think about. Some of you may remember at the very start of the pandemic, there was a dictate that came out from the Japanese roller coaster operators that said that they wanted everyone to stop screaming on the roller coasters because they were worried about transmission of the virus. And their advice instead was for people to, and I quote, scream inside your heart. And this is something, if you're a PhD student, I think most people learned to do this long ago, right? I mean, many of us have done this when I was doing my PhD. I think I did that almost daily. So it's an interesting phrase, and for me, it enlightened a bit about just what people's experiences were like, and it was something that highlighted what many people were doing during the pandemic and why that was so hard. I think there's a few different things happening here. I mean, some of you, let me just see if I can pick some of you out. Some of you will be first year students, and for some amazing reason, you've enrolled in your PhD during the middle of a lockdown in some cities, during the middle of a pandemic. I'm not even sure what that's like. Bravo for doing that. It's very brave. Some of you will be in your second and third year. There might be some people on the call who are in their sixth year. Don't you put your hand up. You need to get done. Unless you're part-time, that's okay. But if you're in that year, you're in trouble. Some of you will have sort of been doing experiments that may have been truncated and turned off. Some of you won't have even had the opportunity to start the experiments you thought you would be doing. And there'll be others who may have been doing certain things in their PhDs, and those have been completely derailed. I know a number of people who have to do all of their work in sort of archival libraries and just haven't been able to access them. And, so their PhDs are completely different. Some of you will be local in cities that you grew up in. Others will be international students who have moved around and are no longer able to move back to where their families are and so forth. And this can be really catastrophic for all of us in the way we can go about our work. I think I've come across a lot of PhD students who have lost their part-time work. And as we know, often scholarships provided by institutions are not sufficient. They're often below the sort of minimum wage levels, and part-time work is often important to augment that. And in many cases, that part-time work has gone away. So we have a variety of different conditions that people are in. Some of you will be supporting families, maybe elderly relatives, maybe children, maybe siblings. And that can be really challenging as well. I think there's probably a few people, and there's still a lot of them around, but I come across where they moved into shared houses under the idea that they would see the other people, a few minutes a day. And all of a sudden they're in cities that are locked down and they're living with these people 24/7. And if you're on the call and you know who you are, I hope you're surviving, because that can be really tough. You probably never thought you'd get yourself into that mess. But the one thing that's true for pretty much everyone in all of these situations is that there seems to be a lack of clarity. This is one of the things I hear many times, is there's a lack of clarity in what my PhD is going to look like, how I'm going to get it finished, what I'm going to do after that. The idea of going to conferences and meeting potential job prospects, or looking at other universities while you're in different cities, a lot of that isn't happening at the moment. And we have some of these virtual events, but they're a little different. They're a little harder. So there's a lot of people out there who are just lacking some clarity, and that's really problematic. Because if there's one thing that stresses humans out a lot, it is a lack of clarity about our future. Because we tend to really think about that nonstop when we don't have clarity. So this is something that happens that I find is really problematic. One of the things I'd like to see, though, with all PhD students is a reset of expectations. This is something that we're not good at doing, but we really have to do at the moment. So I think it's fair to say that in most locations, what was sort of considered normal before has gone out the window. So the way we're going about PhDs is very different than what it was. Now, keep in mind, of course, that a PhD was a stressful scenario back in the good old pre-pandemic days. I mean, in fact, we have a lot of data that says that mental health drops off for PhD students during the period of their candidature. Now, that's particularly problematic if you start in a precarious position. So, when people enter a PhD and they're already not in a really good place in terms of their mental health, PhDs pretty much across the globe tend to degrade that even further. So you've got that as the baseline. And then on top of that, you throw all of the conditions of the pandemic as well, which makes it sort of the perfect storm to put PhD students into a really bad mindset that can be, in some cases dangerous, in other cases just, really problematic with regards to productivity and enjoyment. But no matter where you are in that spectrum, it's something that we need to acknowledge. So one of the things that I like to say to PhD students is that it's actually okay to feel like crap at the moment. Like, I really wouldn't be concerned if you said that to me. Like, in fact, I'd expect it. It really is a tough scenario we're in. And I think most people are feeling pretty bad. And so if you add the weight of a PhD on top of that, go easy on yourself. Give yourself a bit of an update of your expectations, because I wouldn't expect you to be all cheerful and happy-go-lucky while all this is going on. So just, be kind to yourself there. The other thing to keep in mind, of course, alongside that, is that our productivity will not be at its peak when we're in this situation. Our productivity will have gone down significantly. There's a few things we know about productivity, though, with regards to our working week that we really have to start thinking about a lot more diligently with regards to our PhDs. First of all, the idea of a 50 to 70 hour working week is not smart in any industry. What we know is that if you work people harder, they become less happy, less healthy, and less innovative. And so if you want people to be working more effectively and be more productive, what we need to do is reduce their working week hours. This is particularly the case at the moment when there are so many other existential sort of crisis threats around us that we have to face as well. So my advice to most PhD students is, you know what? If you work maybe 2 or 3 really effective days for me a week, that's all I need. I would rather you take 4 days as a weekend and work 3 solid days than try and work 5 days badly or 7 days badly, as is often the case. So if you need to make that argument, you make it on the basis of productivity. You'll be more innovative and more effective on those days when you're well rested. And this is not just made up stuff. This is the way our human brains work, the way we look at the workplace, the way certain organizations around the world are starting to do this, and certain countries are even starting to implement 4-day working weeks as a result of our knowledge in the space. So, go a little bit further again as PhD students and convince yourself that taking that extra day off will make you more effective the following week. This is just a fact. It's not, it's hard to do. I find it hard to do. But we know that we're more effective if we take a break. And this is important. And make sure that break is, doing something valuable, doing something that is for you, not spending the whole time doing everything for everyone else on that day. You need to do something for yourself to give yourself a little bit of a break. So this is important. The other thing that's important at the moment, I think, for all PhD students, and this is part of the conversation we're going to get into in a moment with regards to your supervisors, is making sure you keep a good record of how much time you're losing at the moment with regards to various lockdowns and pandemic restrictions and so forth. And I'm talking about even if it's a few days, but if you add all of this up at the end of your candidature and you can make a clear case with dates to your institution as to the time that you've lost, you'll have a much better chance of getting extensions and so forth than if you just walk in and say, oh yeah, I think I lost about 2 months worth. I mean, what I would like to see is you walk in with an Excel document that says, here are the days that I lost. Here are the exact numbers, and here's how much it adds up to. And guess what? It's 72 days in total. And I want that extension. Because most institutions will struggle with this because the equity amongst students is going to be really tough to deal out, in a way that's fair. Because, if you lose time near the start of your candidature, it's kind of less of a big deal than if you lose it at the end and things like that. So, it's going to be something that they're going to have to work hard on. And the more data you can give them on that, the better off you'll be. So a few things on supervisors. First of all, I think it needs to be acknowledged that most of our supervisors are doing it real tough at the moment. Many of them have been put in situations where they're managing people at a distance. They're often teaching either online or in hybrid situations. If they're really unlucky, the last thing you want to do is be teaching in a hybrid situation where half the people in the room and half the people are online. But all of these things are extremely stressful. Most university budgets have contracted. due to, especially in Australia, which means there's less money available to them. Most of the grant programs have very low success rates. Everything is harder for them. Now, this means they're going to be harder to interact with. They're going to have less time for you, and you're going to actually have to do some things very specific to help with that. Now, what I would like to see is more students understanding what their value is. The value is not just free labor for institutions. Most institutions get a lot of money when students complete. They're a source of incredible innovation. In fact, most of the really great papers come from student projects, not older academics. And you have to remind yourself of that. You're worth a lot. But with that comes some complexities with engaging with a group of supervisors that is frankly time poor, strung out, tired, doing probably 3 times the workload that you have, and really just can't cope with it at the moment. So we need some strategies to sort of get past that. Now, those of you who have read some of my writings will know that I want all institutions to have what I would call a student-centered graduate research system. So a system that basically functions around the student in the same way that we call for a patient-centered healthcare system. Most healthcare systems are system-centered, and the patient kind of is a byproduct. I think in our universities, the students are a byproduct as well. They earn money and they get work done, but the system should really be centered around them so that if they have a problem or they have a concern, it gets fixed immediately. Clear example of that. Many people, when in the past they've gone to conferences, they get reimbursed after the fact. This is a nonsense that has all sorts of equity issues. Students should be given money before they go and then pay back anything that they don't spend. That would be a student-centered system, in contrast to the one we have at the moment, which is a university-centered system. So these things really matter. They make a difference to the students, and they take care of the students' mental health in a variety of ways. So the other thing to keep in mind is that there is a huge power imbalance between you and your supervisor. Whether it is overtly discussed or not is a different thing, but it is always there. And most of the students I know are very aware of this. So it's something that you have to just manage as students, but just be mindful that it's there. So let's talk a bit about some core ideas to help you out. Supervisor time. We talked earlier about the idea that they don't have much of it. Now, this is something that we have to really think about, because if I was to, for example, send you as my supervisor something to read or something to do that was going to take you 5 hours, you'd then look at that and say, okay, where do I fit that in my working week? And the answer is nowhere. And so what happens is 3 months later, I'm emailing you saying, when are you going to get back to me on that, Sasha? When are you going to send me back the information on that document I sent you? And of course, the real answer is, well, when are you going to find 5 hours in your day? But if instead I was to send you the request in smaller parts, so I ask for an hour here and an hour there, and I break it up a little bit, it suddenly becomes manageable. So we have to be mindful of these time constraints and do a little bit of that work on our end, because odds are most of the supervisors I've come across will not do it on their end. So it's something that we can do so that we get quicker responses and more effective responses. I think the other thing to mention is that at the moment, we're looking for much more detailed project management than we ever have before. Those casual conversations many of us would have had in corridors and so forth, they're not happening. So we need more detail in project management. Now, this is something that you might have to go elsewhere for, because many supervisors are not good project managers. And a PhD is a 3 to 5 year project to manage. It is intense. And often we kind of blunder through it and we get through it. But what we really need at the moment is more clear project management to take away some of that lack of clarity I talked about earlier. So that's something where, if you know anyone from a business school, or you've got a friend who knows someone who works in a business school, go and talk to them about project management. It's the stuff they teach. They might be able to help you, or they might be able to talk you through it. Or find a colleague who seems to be good at that stuff and talk to them about it and get some help as well. Don't assume it will all come from your supervisor, because odds are it won't. The other thing to keep in mind, and this is a sort of cautionary tale, but some of you will have amazing interactions with your supervisors, really good interactions. I was doing some consulting work recently for a young psychology PhD student who has had a spectacular interaction with her supervisor for the last 3 years. The stresses over the last few months have led to that supervisor having a significant change in behavior. And that particular interaction now is really fractured. And I had to sort of guide this person through how to repair that relationship. Now, this is someone who had a really good relationship with their supervisor, but because of the stresses of the pandemic, and they're in a clinical space, that has turned bad very quickly. So just be mindful that many of the behaviors that we will see over the coming months will kind of be those exaggerated behaviors that we see, in people when they're really stressed. So we have to be a little bit sort of mindful of that, and we'll see those in ourselves too, not just in our supervisors, but also in ourselves. I think what I want to see all of you doing is really applying your incredible intellects. You're in the top 1% of our society, right, in terms of intellectual capabilities in what you're doing. I want to see you applying that to effectively communicating with your supervisors. So don't just do it as an aside. Think about exactly how you're going to communicate with them. And I'm going to give you a few tips on that in a moment. And similarly with project management, don't just assume things are going to happen. Lay it out on the table. Actually work out deliberately what you're going to be doing when, and talk that through. And of course, think about that power imbalance. I think one of the things that really matters in terms of our interactions with supervisors is how we get feedback. So sadly, no one is taught how to give or receive feedback when they come through schooling. You've probably been in that experience where you've given a talk and you go up to someone afterwards and say, what do you think? How did it go? And they'll look at you a bit sheepish, a bit concerned, and say, oh, it was good. And it's kind of useless in a way. It's polite, but it's useless information. Similarly, if you're sending documents to your supervisor or to your colleagues, what you really need to be doing is giving them license to give you far more information than those simple sort of polite responses. So what I suggest you do is that you get very specific about your feedback. So if I was giving a talk to you and I wanted feedback on that talk, I would turn around to 2 or 3 people in the audience and I would give them separate instructions. One of those people, I would say to them, can you please give me feedback on my slides? Were they effective? Were they too busy? Did I use them well? Did the slides support me, or did I support them? Because there's 2 different outcomes to that, right? And then I'd talk to another person in the audience and say, can you just focus on my narrative? Was my story really clear? Like, was it something that people could connect with? And then I'd go to a third person and say, just give me some feedback on the sorts of ways in which I went about putting information into my talk that people would remember. I think many of you have probably had that scenario where you've been to a conference and 5 minutes after you've gone into the sort of break at lunchtime or whatever, you've forgotten half the talks you heard about that morning, right? And if I asked you a week later, do you remember any of the talks from that conference? Most people would say no. And the reason for that is we don't deliberately do things to help people remember. And so I'd ask these 3 audience members to give me that feedback. And then what would happen is after my talk, each of them would give me incredible amounts of information because I've given them license to really have a go at that stuff, to really give me detail. I've given them permission. They don't feel anxious about doing it anymore, and I don't feel anxious about getting that sort of feedback. So when we ask for feedback from our supervisors, make sure that we do it in such a way that we really have a lot of detail. So if you send them a paper to read, you might want to say, can you just check the science or check the research element of it first. Don't worry about the grammar. I haven't done that yet. I'm sending that to someone else. Or you might do it in stages and give them little requests so that they can do those sections well for you. They'll give you a lot more information than if you just send it to them and say, let me know what you think. Okay, so be deliberate about that. It'll be really helpful. I find that good feedback skills are excellent in all of these arrangements. Even if you're asking one of your colleagues, another PhD student, to give you feedback, you want to do the same thing. Give them instructions on exactly what you need. And it's helpful. If you're giving talks and the only thing you're really worried about is how you start and end your talks, for example, a lot of people have trouble with that. You might want to give me instructions and say, look, Shane, I only want feedback on how I started and how I ended. Don't worry about the middle bit. I'm not worried about that at the moment. I'm just trying to improve my start and my end. And then I will think a lot more effectively on that. I'll work for you while I'm watching. I'm actually doing a job for you while I'm sitting there watching your presentation. So these things can be done really well. The other thing too is at the moment, with our supervisors so stretched in terms of their time, call on your peers for as much as possible. I remember as a supervisor myself, I had one student who would often send me documents that I really felt were there for spell checking and grammar checking, and that was what he wanted from me. This was never a good use of my time. And it really meant that he couldn't access me for the stuff he really needed me for, which was the research. And so make sure you use your supervisors for the part that you need their skills for. It'll be more enjoyable for them. They'll respond quicker and you'll get more of what you need. A lot of the other stuff you can get elsewhere. So think about that. Try not to ask them the trivial stuff if you can help it. So I think we're almost at the end of the amount of time I wanted to spend talking at you before we have a discussion. I think at the moment, we really have to put people and communication first. Our supervisors are, they're often miles above us in the scheme of things. They have incredible power over us. They can destroy our careers. I often say you can take a brilliant supervisor and destroy their career with a brilliant student and destroy their career with a bad supervisor, or you can take a really average student and make them into something special with a great supervisor. They have so much power. But we have a real job to do at the moment in terms of the way in which we interact with them, because they're stressed, they're time poor. We need a lot more from them than we probably normally would, and we need to be more sort of just deliberate about the way we communicate those needs to them. So be really active about how you communicate with your supervisors. Make sure they also know where you're at. So I know in the past, it was pretty common for people not to, talk a lot to their supervisors about when they were struggling and so forth. I think at the moment, this is almost more expected than it's ever been. I think supervisors are worried. They know that there's a disconnect for many people. And I think it's good for you to keep tabs on where you're at with them so that they at least know. And every now and then you might want to say, look, I'm really struggling with all this stuff. I need a month off. I just want to take a month so that I can sort of regroup a bit, because I can feel give the reasoning, say I can feel my efficiency and my productivity going down. And I think I need a bit of a break at the moment. It's not helpful to me. And, and if you ever want to really get your supervisor to do what you want, you just say, look, I'm thinking of leaving. I don't, this is not working for me. The supervisors freak out when they hear that, trust me, and they don't want you to leave. Most of them want you to stay and want you to do really well. So, you can always pull that carrot out if you absolutely need to. But I think just keeping them in the loop about what's happening, how you're feeling, how you're going, how you're progressing, what things you're finding hard, the more information you can give them, the better. Now, I do appreciate there's some supervisors out there that frankly, shouldn't be supervisors. And if you're unfortunate enough to have one of those, that's a whole different conversation. But for the most part, I think most of them, even if they're a bit socially constrained, shall we say, they generally want you to do well and finish. And most of them want to turn you into exactly what they are. So, which is not a good thing, but at least you know what's in front of you. So think a lot about that. Give yourself permission to struggle at the moment. Take time off where you really need it, and don't feel any guilt over that, because what you're really doing is just connecting with your productivity and making sure that's maximized. So it's not like you're just being lazy and taking time off. You're acknowledging that you need a bit of a break, and that will enhance your productivity down the track. That is a positive thing to do. It's a smart thing to do. It will help you finish quicker. So I think on that note, Emily, I might stop there, and happy to answer any questions or have a discussion about some of these issues.
Thank you, Shane. And I'm sure everyone here would find pretty much everything that you said very, very relatable, from the fact that we're all in very different situations through the pandemic and through our own PhDs, to that universities should really think about having a student-centric system, and how much that would definitely benefit not only us but also the industry as a whole. Asking for specific feedback and really trying to use the key skills that our supervisors have, because unfortunately they are also within a bit of a broken system and they're quite time poor. And while that shouldn't disadvantage us, I guess we can use our knowledge of that to try to get what we need from them in a way, that is within our control. So yeah, there's been a couple of questions that have come up within the chat. And there's also an anonymous one here. But yeah. So we've just restarted the recording because we've had to finish up the Q&A session due to time. I just really want to thank Shane for your insights into this area. You know, as with these sessions, it could go for so many hours because there are so many different things that could be addressed, and you know, you have so much knowledge that would be really great to glean from you. So just a reminder for any of our attendees that Shane is available on Twitter, and I've put the link into the chat. And also he's got a Medium where he's written a stack of articles where you might also be able to find some useful information. So I want to thank you attendees as well for joining in and for your participation and asking some of your questions. I hope you know, some of those responses have been helpful for you and helped you to address, you know, a small part of your particular circumstances. And just a reminder that the next session is going to be a discussion by Captive Global Initiative on academic stress triggers. They have performed a global survey of researchers and come up with this report of common academic stress triggers and also how to kind of manage some of those. So that'll be starting in about 8 minutes. And I also just want to say goodbye as chair. This is the last session that I'll be chairing. So thanks so much for having me. I'll still be in the next session, but in more of a attendee role, just like you. So with that, I'll close the session. Thanks, everyone.